Crikey, this rock sure is soft and squishy.
Oh no, that's me!
Ed!
Actually, I kinda like it.
Rocko's Modern Life.
It's time we go back to 1993 for Rocko's Modern Life on Nickelodeon, the far less depressing prequel to Rocko's post-mortem existence. Classic. To put it bluntly, Rocko's Modern Life is an animated Seinfeld. I'm just joking. But not really. Your typical Rocko episode has mundane adult annoyances. Credit cards, parking, air travel, things you'd find in a sitcom, except here have the added benefit of being in a wacky cartoon. Going back to watch Rocko is pretty refreshing. Rather than following a cynical jerk character who's smarter than everyone around him like most stories with this premise, Rocko is less nihilistic and goes into problems with a, welp, that's life attitude. We're all gonna get fucked, might as well bend over. Kurt Cobain, 1992.
Garbage day is a very dangerous day.
He's a character we can all relate to. Granted, Rocko is pretty brave to be freeballing it in public. Besides Doug, Rocko is probably the most down-to-earth Nicktoon at the time. You forgot Hey Arnold. It's still funny and relatable, but some of you may ask, how's a kid in this show for kids going to relate to a character going through stuff like credit card problems? I always say, when you got a non-human character, they can be seen as ageless. Kids can't relate to having a job, but SpongeBob is still funny to them. Imagine how much funnier he'd be if we removed child labor laws. Besides, you don't need to relate to a character to find them funny or interesting. Sometimes wanting to bone them is enough.
Oh baby, oh baby, oh baby. Rocko? Mrs. Bighead?
But if you happen to be a stupid idiot, then you can relate to Rocko's two best friends who even I could beat up, like Heifer the Steer, essentially the Patrick Star of the show, the dumbass friend who makes things worse. Why are they friends? Who cares? And you got Filbert, a turtle who worries about everything.
I'm nauseous. I'm nauseous. I'm nauseous.
It's almost equally their show too, when the episodes featuring them are usually the best. If you don't believe me, look at the voice cast. Heifer is played by Tom Kenny in his first animated role years before he became SpongeBob through genetic mutation. And Filbert is voiced by Mr. Lawrence, another first-time role before he was the voice of Plankton. Even SpongeBob's creator, Steven Hillenburg, started out on Rocko. This was a major jumping-off point for crew members who previously were either independent cartoonists or worked on live-action comedies. That fresh talent who never worked on TV animation really shaped Rocko into such an out-there idea at the time. There were artists working on Rocko who went on to create SpongeBob, Phineas and Ferb, and the Loud House. This review was requested by Nick J for the Patreon review raffle, where you decide the video. If you donate to my Patreon page, please check your messages on there. Some winners have yet to reply. But anyway, Rocko is the go-to for the 500 clickbait article on adult jokes you miss as a kid. I thought, realistically, there'd be one or two jokes here and there, but right out the gate, this show did not hold back. All this flew over my head when I was younger. Just by the second episode, it deals with Rocko's neighbor, Mrs. Bighead, having marital problems and trying to seduce Rocko.
Frank, get away from me.
Very educational.
This is actually like a good example of when people first saw Rocko, they really did not know what to make of it. My father watched this thing and he goes, "Is this supposed to be for children?" The only feedback we were starting to get were these letters that said, how can you do this to my child?
Though that episode was quickly banned, while others were altered upon their second airing. As the series went on, that humor was toned down. Choki's Chicken, the KFC-type place they eat at, later became Chewy's Chicken, and many of the official DVDs are still censored. I've heard the German DVD is entirely uncut, give or take one episode, but the only source on that is Wikipedia and a German Amazon page I can't read. Maybe it's funnier in another language.
María, este libro esta tarde. Voy a la biblioteca.
Juan, vaya con Dios.
Without as much vulgarity, Rocko still thrives off absurdity. There was more to Rocko than it being dirty. Some of my favorite episodes didn't even push boundaries all that much. Like the relatively tame episode I See London, I See France, which involves this European tour guide who seriously has a problem and does not want anyone to see the Eiffel Tower. Why? It's never explained, and it doesn't need one. This was another reason why Tom Kenny was great on this show, voicing Heifer and this tour guide.
What are you doing, number 13? You're not planning to leave me too, are you? I haven't authorized you to exit this bus! Get back on this bus and we'll forget the whole thing! Number 13!
But my true favorite episode, outside one I'll discuss later, was the Magic Meatball, where we had Rocko's grumpy neighbor, Mr. Big Head, use a magic meatball to decide all his business decisions. This keeps promoting him in his office job, but at the same time, puts him in a delusional state where he marries this magic meatball he thinks is real.
It's just that they're coming at 5 o'clock and time is almost up. I need to know the answer.
You're not the man I married!
Not the man you married? Listen, you! I've given you everything! Now you've gotta tell me the answer!
Yeah, this show was fucked up. Also, bonus points for having a full episode without the main character showing up. I love when stories can do that, give side characters their own expanded universe.
I'm sorry to waste your time, sir.
So how did Rocko and so many 90s shows get away with all those adult jokes? Well, my theory is that this was the 90s when The Simpsons was at its peak popularity. It showed that there was a market for adults into cartoons too. So Nickelodeon decided to make some kid shows that could appeal to adults also. I think back to what Powerpuff Girls creator Craig McCracken said when he blogged about his experience at Cartoon Network. Apparently shows like Powerpuff and Samurai Jack weren't really thought up with kids in mind. They were designed based on what the cartoonists thought be fun and to appeal to 25-year-olds. Craig said the crew at the time were guinea pigs for what would later become Adult Swim, a place where adult animation could finally thrive. That makes sense when you remember Dexter, Powerpuff, and Cow and Chicken all had at least one banned episode each.
So you're off then? Yeah, we're gonna go up your lab.
Today we kinda know our boundaries and can edit out things easier with computers, thus we don't get too many episodes pulled in America. But that's not to say modern cartoons refrain from doing dirty jokes. Have you seen The Amazing World of Gumball?
I don't think I have the strength to inflate. Thanks, Gumball.
Whatever, man.
Rocko had adult innuendo, surreal humor, and at its worst, gross-out jokes. This was fairly common in a post-Ren and Stimpy era, but Rocko didn't rely as much on it when slice of life was its thing. Still, this is one of those cartoons parents didn't want us watching, as I did briefly become a parent up until the incident outside Target. I would agree, there's a few disgusting scenes I'd rather not have watched. I don't know what it is, but there is so much eye gouging on this show. Like, what is their deal?
Hey, Spike, can I have your autograph?
Here's a question. Would gross-out shows like these be accepted now? Anytime a new ugly show comes out, they don't seem to last very long, or when they do, they're not very well received, at least online. But you have to understand the time period and what came before the 90s. Cartoons in the 80s were a lot more sterile. You had blatant toy commercial action heroes who couldn't actually punch anyone while teaching kids a stupid lesson. Or you had slice of life shows with wholesome Disney-like talking animals, Smurf bootlegs, or humans with proper anatomical proportions. Those cartoons were mostly created by marketing committees. That's how things were done for a while, but then came the 90s, a time period that I can only surmise using this real-life Nintendo commercial featuring music by the Butthole Surfers. Yes, really.
No running, no spitting, no loud music, no skateboarding, no shouting, no gum chewing. Keep off the grass, do not feed the animals. Have a nice day.
We want to be free. We want to do what we want to do. We want to have a good time. And that's what we're going to do. Oh, my body burns, she's where go.
It was in this radical era where Nickelodeon decided to have cartoons crafted not by toy companies, but cartoonists with their own crazy ideas. The first three of these Nicktoons were Doug, Ren and Stimpy, and the Rugrats. Compared to the decade before, these look like a bunch of messy doodles. A medium known for friendly talking animals or morally upright heroes got tainted by this rebellious 90s attitude.
You won't find them in Never Never Land. They're not squishy and sweet, and they don't make you go goo-galoo. They're the Nicktoons, and they're not here to be cuddly. Doug, Ren and Stimpy, the Rugrats. They'll battle the biggest bully, climb the highest toilet, even... Well, you don't want to know. These are no stuffed animals. They've got real problems, real adventures, and they're real loud. So if you're not satisfied with the old cookie-cutter cartoons you find everywhere else, turn to the Nicktoons. Tomorrow starting at 10, 9 Central on Nick.
By the 90s, we were getting dysfunctional family sitcoms that there's so many clean-cut shows, goofy superheroes that there's so many serious stoic ones, sloppy animations that there's so many solid cartoons. All this counterculture shaped the 90s. Music was more cynical, comics were grittier, video games were proud of their violence, and cartoons on TV were doing things they weren't allowed to before, frequently putting them on the news.
Zimmerman set up a hotline in California to force MTV to tone down the violence, whatever the hour.
Stay tuned as Beavis and Butthead burn things and blow stuff up.
Burn things and blow stuff up, yeah. Something to stay tuned for.
Next on Nickelodeon, it's Rocko's Modern Life, followed by Figure It Out.
And now, the part you've all been waiting for. The cornerstone of the animation industry, the lifeblood of its very existence.
Toys.
When creator Joe Murray first made Rocko, he couldn't believe Nick was allowing him to make something in this style. Animation takes a long time, so the previous Nicktoons hadn't premiered yet. All he knew was the 80s. 90s animation was so different from that time. You are not gonna see He-Man shoot snot from his nose or the Smurfs living in the big pile of shit.
That's one big pile of shit.
This was new and exciting, but once everyone started doing anything gross, extreme, and in your face, this just became standard. If the 90s were the doodly, messy era, in response, the 2000s became the opposite. It was the sharp, flat, blocky era, while in response, the 2010s softened up with more rounded characters requiring some spherical depth, meaning we're overdue for sharp, edgy cartoons returning for 2020, hopefully. That is when I will strike.
Now, just fill in the forms and we'll begin your diagnosis. Okay, Mr. Help Me, the pain is excruciating. The doctor will see you now. Mr. Excruciating?
That's funny, because the US medical system is a fucking joke. As trends flipped, gross-out shows became less and less accepted. Sure, now you can do it, but why would you want to? It's not shocking, it's just whatever. Want a cartoon with adult jokes? We got tons of them now. You can have gross-out jokes, but that can't be the main selling point anymore. Nor will they stir up much controversy when the moral panic focuses more on video games. I like Rick and Morty for its parodying of sci-fi tropes, not because Rick gets drunk, shits himself, and passes out. My dad does that. Rick ain't special. Many of these 90s cartoons were products of the time. While Ren and Stimpy or Cow and Chicken could be despised in retrospect, we can thank them for pushing boundaries enough that we have legroom to do other things with this medium. We're now cynical adults. Of course we hate gross-out humor. So did our parents when we were enjoying these shows as kids. My other question is, do kids still like this stuff? Have you seen their toy commercials?
Doggy did what doggies do. Everyone's favorite doggy, Doggy Doo.
There is definitely a market for it, but thankfully not enough to base a whole show on. The great thing about Rocko is it's a surreal sitcom first and a gross-out show second. It definitely holds up better through its characters. 90% of the show was mindless fun, but they kinda snuck in a bit of family drama, mostly relating to 20-somethings having to deal with parents not respecting where their life is heading. Like with the character Ralph Bighead, a cartoonist who was disowned by his parents for pursuing animation rather than a less ambitious job.
Ha! Go back to Hollywood and that cartoon of yours.
Cartoons are my life, and I thought that maybe you had finally come to respect that.
There's so many episodes that are actually from things that happened to me in my own life.
Yeah.
Or the writers. Like, I Have No Son, we had a lot of writers who had problems with their fathers, but the place they were going to go to in their life, and they didn't agree with it. And,
yeah.
there was it's real life.
That's artists, yeah.
Stuff happening. So it was very easy for us to write, and a lot of people seem to connect with it. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it's weird. We get more from the Big Head family than we do from Rocko's near non-existent family. Ralph later appeared in my other favorite episode, Wacky Deli, a cartoon about making cartoons. In this episode, Ralph grows tired of the show he created and wants out, but his contract says he can't leave until his show is no longer successful. So he hires Rocko and his Chuckle Nut friends to make a cartoon with zero experience. This is the end result.
I am the cheese. I am the best character on the show. I am better than both the salami and the bologna combined. Hello?
Ralph was a reflection of and voiced by creator Joe Murray, who was amazed Rocko lasted so long, but also felt burnt out. Yet I don't think Joe ever tried to ruin his own show. Now, Ralph Bighead was not the only side character dealing with family drama. This is where I gotta bring up Dr. Hutchinson, a character who was solely added in because the network needed a female character with, quote, a good hook.
My name is Dr. Hutchison.
Isn't she cute?
They did not mean literally, but that's just how Joe Murray rolls. Instead of ending up like a token female character that tags along to either be the no-fun police and or jack-off material, Hutchinson was a recurring goofy character that fits into this world as a dentist, surgeon, vet, pharmacist, and a pediatrician with her own gleeful sense of sinister humor.
Good afternoon, Mrs. Bighead. Time to unwrap you.
She would appear often through the series and develop a romance with Filbert against her mother's wishes. This led to several episodes building up to both a marriage and having children right after. Because the idea of two animals mating to give birth may have been a little too out there, Rocko handled this in a way only this show could.
She's gonna have the baby any second. Oh my gosh, it's the stork. Don't let him get ahead of us. Move over, Grandma, I'm taking over.
Rocko's Modern Life lasted 4 seasons and ended by the 52-episode rule, a rule that canceled many successful shows that could have gone longer. The idea was, why spend money to make new episodes when rerunning 1 episode per week can last a whole year? 52 episodes, 52 weeks in a year, 52-episode rule. Stupid, I know. After Rocko's cancellation, Murray took a break from TV and went on to make children's books, flash animations, and eventually returned to TV with Camp Lazlo and several other projects. But in 2018, Murray and much of the old crew reunited for a TV movie. Rocko's Modern Life, Static Cling.
I don't think we're in the 90s anymore.
Rocko's Modern Life.
It's a special in which Rocko ends up in our modern life to face the likes of 3D printers, smartphones, and Zack Snyder. Tune into eventually whenever it gets released so I can review it. But until then, Rocko is the type of show that can benefit from being adapted decades after cancellation. We're still dealing with the same issues faced in those 90s episodes, which tells you it's a timeless show that can be modernized without really changing anything. Does that make any sense? No, it does not. What does make sense is right now will always be a modern life.
That was a hoot!
Please clap.
Can you survive a whole week without an episode of Rocko's Modern Life?
Never.
Can you last a few more days?
Never.
Without an eye-popping,
Never.
flap-flattening,
Never.
wallaby-walloping Rocko adventure?
Never.
Then Nickelodeon's
Never.
gonna keep you waiting.
Oh. Look.
For another episode of Rocko's Modern Life, today at 11:30, 10:30 Central on Nickelodeon.
Dad, can we use your tools?
No.